Professor Lee.
Hello. How are you guys?
Good.
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 Good. I just got Furball excited to see me today, so I can't get her out of my lap.
Ah.
I literally got off work and she's like, somebody's home. Give me attention.
Well, I'm going to start out with attendance. And Emily, are you here, Blackard?
I'm here.
Emily Cholera?
I'm here.
How do you say your last name?
Colora.
Cholera. Okay, I'm going to remember that. Yvette. Yvette, are you here? Okay, Nellie?
Here.
Sydney?
Here.
Katie? Abby?
I'm here.
Michaela?
Here.
Krista?
Here.
Alexis?
I'm here.
Lauren?
Here.
Mariana?
Here.
Tiffany? Maribel?
Here.
Carissa?
Here.
Guadalupe?
Here.
Tyler?
Here.
Sandra?
Here.
Jacqueline?
Here.
Risa?
Here.
JC? JC? Annie?
Here.
Lindsay?
Here.
Okay, so I'm only missing Katie. And I don't think she showed up any of the classes, so I might need to reach out to her. Yvette? Sorry, go ahead. Do you know Katie Ellis? Does anybody know Katie Ellis?
Well, our group has been trying to reach out to her, and I don't know if we've heard anything.
Okay, it might be that she
reached out to you or anybody else in our group specifically?
No, not me. Okay, well, I'll reach out to her today. The last time she accessed Blackboard was on May 31st. So maybe she's going to plan to drop the class or something. I'm not really sure.
Okay, because, we're trying to get our project started, and we're like, where is she at?
Yeah, that's tough. All right, well, I'll do that today. Yvette, Tiffany, and JC is who I have missing.
I think Tiffany is trying to get in.
I'm here.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, she got the link. She's like, help.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go over chapters 3 and 4 today. I'm going to go ahead and screen share with y'all. So over here on Blackboard, if you look at the chapter instructions and you click the link, it'll take you to instructions for what to do for each chapter besides just reading the chapter. It's always going to be really short. I don't think there's ever more than, it's usually between 3 minutes to maybe 12 minutes, maybe 15 of listening or looking at something supplemental. Chapter 3 does have a couple of links. This is why I'm pointing it out that I want you to watch. And so does chapter 4. And then again with chapters 5 and 6 coming up. So it's not a lot, but make sure that y'all are accessing this. And anytime that it says journal article, book chapter, podcasts, anything like that. These podcasts and things, I just want to remind you guys that if you go to our textbook companion website and you hover over the link to the chapter, actually you have to click on it. That's where it has the journal articles, book chapters, podcasts, and web links. And like for example, if you click on podcasts, they're very short. They're usually like maybe 45 seconds of the author, maybe a minute of the author. So both of these are about a minute and a half of the author just giving you some extra information about the chapter, why the chapter was written, or extra thoughts. So it's really not a lot, but I just wanted to point that out to y'all just to make sure that y'all are accessing that. So again, you just go to the chapter instructions and it'll take you to the link on Blackboard. And so some of these chapter instructions are added in extra, like some of the YouTube links that I put in here were not, either the book had some links that really didn't work anymore or something like that, or I just felt like there were some extra videos that I think would help you better understand something important that I think will come up again. So that's what this is. Just be aware of it. And there are extra instructions for every chapter. I don't ever have you read extra. So I'm never going to have you read an extra journal article or something. They are there if you want them. That might be a really good resource for y'all when you go to write your philosophy. But I never have you read extra. It is always just little bitty podcast excerpts or a YouTube video. And I also put little directions such as this, like speed up the video to 1.25 because the speaker talks kind of slow. So you can choose to do that or not, but I also try to give you a little advice like that. Any questions about this? Okay, any questions about anything else before we get started? Okay, let me shut the door to my office real quick. Okay. Let me pull up the chapter. So in chapter 1, it started going over each of the theorists and philosophers very briefly. And this chapter 3, does something similar, but what it does is goes over the founding fathers. So the important people who made our field what it is, people who made education important when nobody really thought it was important, whenever kids weren't even required to go to school, when children didn't have rights, things like that. Like, you were allowed to have 13 kids and send them all to work at the cotton factory. And they were like, 5, 6 years old working a 12-hour shift. So like that kind of stuff used to go on. So these founding fathers we're going to look at today, right here, these people are the important pillars of our field. So you have so back in the day, like I was just telling you, people used to not see childhood as being very important. So there's the pendulum swing that has happened back and forth between decades, between centuries, where people argue about the purpose of childhood, what children should be learning in school, what's important and what's not important for kids to have during their daily life experiences growing up. So the pendulum swings back and forth, people arguing that kids should be having hands-on experiences and should be playing and enjoying childhood and not worrying about adult problems, swinging back over to no, we don't have time for that. Kids should be working. They need to contribute to the family. They need to be helping earn money to put food on the table. They need to be seen and not heard. And then the pendulum will swing back the other way. So it's just this back and forth. So I'm going to ask you now, where do you feel like that pendulum has landed between kids should have rights, kids should be heard also, or kids kind of don't have rights and need to be taken care of and need to do whatever adults tell them to do? Like, where do y'all think that pendulum is swung to right now?
Personally, I think it's like, Personally, I think it's like maybe a mix of it, like a mix of all three. And it just literally depends on maybe your upbringing or your family's perspective or how you were raised, but also how as you get older, you may have seen something when you were 10 in one light compared to how you see it at 18 or 35 or 60.
Yeah, and you brought up some good points there whenever you're talking about it just depends on how you're brought up. It depends on not only like who your parents are, like on a micro level, like who your parents are, what sort of city or town you live in. Is it country or urban or suburban or in the middle of a big city? What state you live in. Is it a southern state, a northern state? To what country you live in and what rights you have as a child in a particular country. So, because kids in like other countries such as India or Pakistan may not have the same rights as kids in America or kids in France. So it really just has a lot of like where that pendulum is swinging right now has a lot to do with location. So in terms of our country and our state and like kind of what we are exposed to, do you feel like kids have rights? Do you feel like they're taken care of and respected and listened to? Or do you feel like they are made to do things that they shouldn't do? They're not ready for these things yet. And it's kind of forced upon them. And just use in reference to us and like where we are, where, you know, who we're interacting with, the kids that we will come into contact with. What do you guys think?
I feel that um it has changed over the years, like crazy. I feel like kids have more of a say so. Teachers are allowing their kids to like have a student taught lesson, or like the kids can come up and like help the teacher teach. Like it used to be more on the teacher as they sit down, you're going to do exactly what I say, no ifs, ands, or but about it. But I feel like the classrooms are opening up to letting the kids actually express themselves, and like they have a voice now.
So inside the classroom, you feel like kids are starting to have more of a voice.
Yes.
Does anybody feel like there are things that make kids not have a voice in the classroom or with teachers?
Maybe being shy or just kind of introverted, like maybe they don't feel confident in speaking, like because maybe they at home their parents are like, no, that's dumb, that's stupid, yada yada yada, or they just don't want to get laughed at by the other kids. Because I know when I was younger, it's just you don't want to get made fun of just because you're maybe different or your ideas don't exactly fit in with the status quo.
So aside from personality traits, so let's talk about, those are all really good points. Think about external things that they have no control over. Do you feel like, can anybody attest to kids being exposed to things that are too adultish for them or too hard for them in schools now? Or do we think that kids have a voice, like Alexis said, they have a voice, they're heard, and it's getting better? Does anybody have a flip side of that coin?
I feel like whenever kids are in school, sometimes they don't have a say so. Or like, well, I know this is like a given why they don't have a say so, or like content and stuff like that. Like I feel like other students may have different interests and they can't really get to those interests. Like let's say somebody is more into arts, but they're having to learn more about math and stuff like that. So I feel like maybe that's one of the things that they don't really have a say so. But then again, it's like something that's out of their control and even out of our control.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because the first thing whenever they start restructuring the school day to make up more time for studying for mandated tests and stuff like that, the first thing or if it's comes down to money, needing more money, some of the first things they take away are like library time or art or, shorter PE, or maybe they don't get recess or something like that. So yeah, I can see that. That's a good point. Anybody else? So what do you guys think about teaching them about racism or slavery or anything like that? Like at what age do you think that we should start giving them the history of our country?
I would say like by second grade, most children have built a little bit more knowledge to be able to understand the meaning behind it. So I actually took my son to the Holocaust Museum by the end of first grade, and he kind of understood what it was about. But then I took him again this year, and he was able to grasp more. Like he related the movie that he watched on Netflix to the events that he saw at the museum. So
What movie was that?
the boy in the striped pajamas,
Oh, okay.
yeah, he really liked it, but he just got very sad.
Yeah, hopefully. Otherwise, you got a little sociopath on your hands there.
I know.
So one thing that happened to me was when I was teaching first grade, I had to introduce them to the idea of skin color. And it's not that they didn't know that already, but it was Black History Month and we were talking about, whatever the curriculum had us talking about. And I remember Ian was in my class and he was one of the only African American kids in my class. I think maybe the only one, but I had a really diverse class. I had kids from Korea, India, like it was down there by NASA. So I feel like in that area, it was just a big mix. I don't know what draws people down there from all over, but I had a really like good mix of kids in my class. But anyway, I was the one who taught them to see that. Like it was crazy, y'all, that we were sitting on the rug and I was sitting in my rocking chair, this rocking chair right here. And I was telling them whatever it was about Black History Month and how people used to be slaves and stuff like that. And they're like, why? And it's like, because of their skin color and and where they were from. And everybody like looked at Ian and Ian was sitting there like, and I was just like, cause Ian was kind of goofy, he was like just this real fun loving little kid. But I saw them see it for the first time and it like broke my heart a little bit because I feel like I'm the one who like they were going to learn that anyway. But I definitely know for many of them, I was the one who pointed it out because of us teaching that in first grade. So I didn't really know how I felt about that. I don't know if we should be doing that in school or at home or both. I don't really know. So some of the topics that come up in the curriculum might be, it's going to be based on opinion. But some of the topics that might come up in the curriculum might be a little bit too advanced for what some people believe should be being taught at a certain grade level. And then also just the pressures of homework and standardized testing and stuff like that. Some of those things, whenever we were little and we were in school, we played, had recess, didn't have homework. My friends would walk across the street to my house. We'd play on my rope swing after school, stuff like that. But now I feel like kids have a lot more homework. The TOS test, we got crackers and juice in the morning. We took the test, never came up again. We didn't spend time studying for it really or anything. And now it's like everything you do after Christmas, once you get into second or third grade, is all about like benchmark testing and stuff like that for that test. So it's like a lot of stress. So it's almost like work. So do you guys feel like some of those things are too hard for students to handle? Like the stress is too much, or like some things in the curriculum are too serious of a topic for kids? Or do you feel like, no, I think it's pretty appropriate. And I think that kids have a lot of, more maturity now or something like that. Like, what do y'all think? What are your thoughts on it?
Now that you talked about it and like with the tax test, like even thinking about it whenever I was in school and being, in it like not too long ago, we used to have like, when I was in elementary, at our elementary, we used to have lockdowns and things like that. And now to like see, now like I'm a substitute here at Huntsville ISD. So I was in the mix there whenever they were trying to prepare for the STAR exam and TELPAS and all of that. And I like see all of the kids stressing about those different kind of tests. And when I was there, like the kids that I grew and like I was really fond of, that you can see the worry in their eyes. Like they were so stressed, like, oh my God, what if I don't pass this test? And I feel like that's not a good behavior to have in our kids, especially at such an early age, and how fast like we tend to grow up and everything else that comes our way too. I feel like we need to kind of lay back on it a little bit and have the kids do things on their own and have fun as they're learning too.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I feel like
just real quick, Tyler, you brought up another good point about, I didn't even think about the fact that we have lockdown drills and stuff like that. And we obviously have to tell them why. Well, whenever we were little, we had like, if there's a tornado, and now it's like, if an armed shooter comes into your school, you know what I mean? Like, that's a big topic for a first grader. So anyway, go ahead, Tyler.
I feel like maybe y'all can agree to this, but it's like, as she was saying, like worry and stress, like kids get anxiety, testing anxiety, or depression, or maybe anger issues because like at such an early age, you already got to worry about this big task, stress, work, work, work. They don't have any detox to just have creative freedom or relax time. You get so caught up in you have to do this, and this. It's like they're already like little kids having jobs, like at such a young age, and it just messes with either their mental, emotional, or physical health, which, as I stated earlier, could affect them in and outside of the classroom, personality-wise, or just academically as well. Like they don't have any creative freedom to just do whatever they want or relax or just get all that pimped up stress, anger, sadness, worry out in a positive outlet. Because say, as Guadalupe as a parent, the kid goes to school, they probably do homework or they have activities, soccer till 9, or like in high school, you know, you go to school at a very early hour, school, activities, do 3 hours of homework. You don't get a break. Like you physically don't get a mental or physical break.
Yeah, they're prepping them for that whole like, if you take a nap and you're an adult, you should feel guilty. You know, if we're not working all the time, we sort of feel guilty. Like, man, I'm laying here vegging out and I should be doing something. Like, they start training us for that. They being like whoever, you know, the people in our society who are in the upper echelons who make the middle class work harder and harder. Like, they start training us for that when we're really young, I think. But like Alexis said in the beginning, there is a push for play-based learning and kids being the center of the curriculum and it not being teacher-led. There is a push for that because of research that has come out, because of theorists like we're going to learn about this semester who say that children need time to play, long extended periods of time to play and collaborate, and they need sensory experiences and concrete authentic materials and lots of play space and time to go outside. And so there is a push for that. Thank goodness that it even came up in our class as like, yeah, I think that kids do have that, because that's a pretty big shift from what it has been in the past. So anyway, so that pendulum is still just like, it's like, I don't even know if a pendulum is a really good like metaphor or whatever for it, or a simile. I don't really know if that's it, because it's not really like swinging to one side or the other. It's almost like a tug of war is like a better one maybe. But anyway, I just wanted y'all to think about that. So when we talk about these founding fathers today, these kinds of topics, like, so we talked about stuff going on in our world right now, but there were other things going on, like the Industrial Revolution, like I was telling y'all, kids going to the factories and working all day in the factories, and no contraception and stuff like that. So you have a bunch of kids in your family and there was a lot of poverty, and the class system was really separated out. And so there were different problems at different periods of time. And so what we just talked about is what we're dealing with right now that is causing sort of that tug of war between what childhood should be, what they're ready for, and all that kind of stuff. So I want to ask you, is how we view childhood shaped by our own experience of childhood? Do you feel like your ideals about childhood come from what you were raised like?
I mean, I guess people, I mean, for me, like you take those positive and not so positive things from your childhood and you try to, the positives you take as a for granted and you want to use those, but then you also use the negative to like change something else. So I think it's like you do use it, but it could be used for changing something or keeping it the same.
Good point. I like that. Does anybody have any other input for that question? Okay, and then describe the world that you were born into. So what was it like? And so I'm going to put you in a breakout room for this one, only for like maybe 3 minutes. And I just want y'all to start talking about what it was like when you were little and how that has affected your desire to become a teacher and the way that you think you'll handle things in your classroom and the way that you see childhood. Because we're going to look at these founding fathers today and for chapter 3. And I think you're going to see that some of their childhoods probably did have an impact, or their early lives had an impact on them wanting to change the way things were and on some of their philosophies as well. So first, I just kind of want you to talk about your own experience. So I'm going to give you just about 2 or 3 minutes to go into a breakout room and do that. Okay, go ahead and go.
No one ever joined my breakout room. It was just me.
I saw that, so I just now moved you to room 6.
Okay.
Michaela was supposed to be in your room. Sorry
Oh,
about
okay.
that. Oh, Michaela must be going to the bathroom or something. Okay, while we're waiting on people to come back in, we have like 10 more seconds or so. Does anybody want to share something that was maybe important that somebody said in your breakout room or that you said? You don't have to share everything, but just if you thought something was enlightening or important.
One of my colleagues did mention how she wants to become a teacher to make the environment more diverse. She feels like we should have a little bit of every ethnicity inside of the school setting, so that students can see that anyone can become a teacher. Yeah,
That's a good point. Okay, that is actually a perfect lead in to what I was about to tell you guys, which is that we don't really understand exactly how children learn things. That was just one of the bullet points that I had there that I wanted to mention. Because of MRI scans and stuff like that, we're starting to learn more about how the brain works. And because we've become a recognized field, we have people who study, like researchers who study our field. You can get a doctorate in our field, a higher degree, a master's level degree. You could become a specialist, a curriculum specialist, or a coach. So these things didn't used to exist. So just to close that out. And then like with what you said about our field not being very diverse. So by the late 1880s, women made up the majority of all of our country's teachers. And if men were teachers, they would teach physics or something like that. They didn't work with small children. So yes, the need for diversity is definitely there, not only to have both genders in our field, but also people from different socioeconomic backgrounds and races and stuff like that as well. People who speak multiple languages, all those sorts of things, because it's definitely a white female dominated field. Couple of different definitions here. Okay, so these are 3 types of thinking, okay? Empiricists are people who think that we learn about the world around us all through sensory experiences. Behaviorists are people who think that we can observe and measure behaviors based on how people respond to external stimuli. And then the nativist view is that we inherit our abilities and that's pretty much it. So whenever we're studying and whenever all of these people we're about to look at studied children and education, they would a lot of times fall into one of these 3 categories. But now we've sort of changed it to what I told you guys yesterday, which was the behaviorist still kind of sticks, but then we have the constructivist view and then the social view. So let's get started. So I'm going to put you guys into a couple of groups. We cannot do this part. This was like a really neat part of this activity that we do. So we would normally make anchor charts and then we would set them up in order. And I had a timeline up in the classroom and you could tell when your theorist was born and when they died. So you could see sort of that they all were sort of clumped in the same time period. They lived in the same, a lot of them lived in about the same time period. And then also I would have you mark on a map where they were from. A lot of them were from Europe and not North America. So anyway, we can't do this bottom portion, but we are going to work in groups to look at these people and come up with some way to share a couple of different things about them. So on each of the next slides, I have listed the different theorists we're going to go over. So I'm going to put you into, how many groups do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different groups. And you can pull this PowerPoint up. So like, let's say you get Locke, and they're basically the same. I have life and career, influential views, and then I put some of the most important things about them that I want you to share with us. You can share these, and if you want to share something else, that's fine too. You can pull pictures off the internet. You can do whatever you want to share about this person with us. Or you can just focus on what the textbook says and talk with us through it. I highly recommend, though, that you have some kind of visuals for us to look at while you're doing it, while your group is sharing. But I have kind of what I want you to go over for each one of them. So like, let's say you get Rousseau, life and career, influential views, and then a couple of important things from Rousseau. So I'm going to put you into 7 different breakout rooms. I'm going to give you probably about 15 minutes to come up with a brief summary of important things about the person that you're assigned to. And one person in your group or both of y'all can choose to share with the whole class when we get back into the main breakout room. And hopefully you'll add some pictures in there, but you don't have to. You don't have to go outside of the textbook. You can just focus on what is in chapter 3 in the textbook about that person. Or if you want to do a Google search, you can do that as well. And we're gonna, when we all come back in the same room together, take about, I don't know, 1 to 2 minutes, maybe talking about them. So we'll spend about 15 minutes or so gathering ideas in our groups, and then 1 to 2 minutes sharing. So this will probably take about 45 minutes. Anybody have any questions about this?
I do. Professor, where exactly do I find it? Like find this PowerPoint that you're talking about right now?
So if you go onto our Blackboard and go to PowerPoints and pull up PowerPoints for chapters 3 and 4. So go to PowerPoints here. And then it says PowerPoints for 3 and 4. I clicked on the top one. I think this is a double. I think they're the same, but I just clicked on this top one right here. That's the one we're looking at over here.
I got it. Thank you. And you'll enable us to be able to share our screen, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Any other questions? You can put pictures of them too as well if you want, like something like that, where they're not just all thrown on one slide. Any other thoughts before I put you all in breakout rooms?
Is the breakout room going to tell us which theorists we got?
Very good question. So if you're in breakout room 1, you'll be Locke, Rousseau, 2, Froebel, 3. It'll just go in order like that.
Okay, thank you.
And I can try to type it in real quick also and like send out a little thing so you can see it. Okay. All right. But if you need to look, you can just know they go in order. All right. So I have 7 rooms and I'm going to open them all.
Hi, sorry, my Wi-Fi kicked me off. I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
I said, sure, likely excuse.
Right? I was like, no.
And that happens to me all the time. You got back on pretty quick, I guess. It usually takes me like a minute and a half.
Well, I'm at work, so they don't have the best Wi-Fi, but I'm a nanny.
Okay.
Just warning you.
I don't know which room you were in though.
I wasn't here when you broke us out, so.
Okay, I think I'll just put you in room 2.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go ahead and have the lock group go first. And you can screen share as well.
Okay. I can screen share.
Okay.
Okay, so can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So me and my partners did John Locke. So he was pretty much born into a life where he would see his mother being beat a lot because it was considered to be the right of a husband. So after you married someone, pretty much you were owned by your husband, and your children were expected to obey their fathers. So pretty much the same thing. You know, the father was pretty much your ruler. He grew up with King Charles of England, so his whole life it was pretty much about following obedience and following, you know, what to do. Wasn't, you know. Mariana, do you want to do your influential views first one?
Yes, so we discovered that he believed in tabula rasa. I don't know if I said that right, but so basically this says that once someone's born, like whenever they begin life, it is a blank slate. So that gets filled within different experiences, of course. So he was an influential thinker. He was an empiricist, as he did believe that what we tend to learn and the knowledge and our understandings come through our sensory play. So whatever we experience and anything that we encounter. So his purpose of education was that he saw purpose as that education instills within individuals and a strong sense of virtue. So he had a great emphasis as well on the importance of learning as well, and like basically how it affects young children too. Nelly?
So basically I did the views on authority. So Locke believed that watch how brain fart. I'm sorry. Believe that people should use their own reason. So like it's all really up to us what we want to believe, not on what the authority has told us to believe. So if I disagree with authority, that's okay as long as I have reasoning behind it. So just to use what we've learned throughout our life is what he believed on. That was his views on authority. And I think that's basically it because I said everything else. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Yeah. I think he believed that simply because he grew up being told what to do. So I do think his life or his theory has a lot to do with how he grew up and the experience and challenges he faced. So yes.
Yeah, probably feeling super controlled.
Yes. So now that he has freedom, I think he believes that children deserve freedom to learn through their own experiences and their own beliefs, I guess, their own understanding and knowledge.
And one thing that the textbook also said about him is way above, or like way further ahead with his theory than most theorists. So like he already had a good grasp of what's kind of coming closer to us as we're still developing and learning more about how students learn.
Yeah, he was a progressivist, and he was a thinker ahead of his time, is basically how they describe him. And that tabula rasa, that is just that you're born with nothing, like you don't have any background knowledge,
You're born with a blank book.
Even your I don't even think he thought that your biology really played into it. You're just completely blank, and then you just learn through your senses, and that's what he thought. Good job. Next group. Thanks for sharing. I like the way y'all didn't read it to us also. I don't know if I mentioned that, but when we're presenting in this class, try not to read stuff to us, and y'all did a great job of that. And I didn't even, maybe Nelly told y'all that because Nelly wasn't, no, you didn't tell him? Okay, well, y'all did great.
Thank you.
Rousseau, let's have the Rousseau group go.
Yeah. Emily, do you want to start screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay, we had Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and the first thing about his life was that his mother had died like barely 9 days after he was born. So that was obviously a huge significance, a huge significant event in his life. And also the fact that 10 years later, his father ended up leaving him after marrying his second wife. And so those two major influences impacted the way he saw early childhood and parenting. And luckily, though, I believe he was brought up by family members, so they kind of guided him. And so, sorry, left him. Yeah, and so this helped guide him into thinking that every human being is born good, and depending on their environments, like let's say media and materialism, that kind of, how he put it, like it kind of they're agents of a potential perversion. So basically, his whole theory was that everyone's born good, but depending on your environment, how they influence you, brings out how you come out as an individual. And also that the purpose of teachers and tutors is that they help provide guidance and they shape the environment that a person is being taught in, as well as they well, as another way of saying they guide them, they channel the impulses and drives that are like in young children and direct them in a way, but also give them a positive expression of how to channel these drives and impulses. And Emile was a book he actually wrote, and it's kind of reflective of his life because it starts with a young boy, and it's through from infanthood all the way to adulthood, and how the boy, his morals change as he grows up, but he's also being guided and directed by a figure who is you can say is a tutor. And L'Art de Former Homes is basically Rousseau's primary a view of the function of education, which is basically the art of forming man, which is another way of just saying that that education, the environment shapes how a person is brought up. So that is Rousseau's, and also, of course, his theory later lists the stages people go through from infancy all the way to adulthood.
It's interesting that he was so against media and materialism because he was born in like the early 1700s, I think. And like, what were there, newspapers? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like
there
what?
was. Yeah. And I believe the French Revolution happened right after he died. I believe so. So it was just like another example of like, yeah, media can really, it was really prominent back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And he did not like materialism, wealth, and stuff like that. He thought it ruined you. All right, great job. And your little speaker thing is awesome. Okay, let's have the next group go.
Can anyone go? So we can go if we want, Professor?
It doesn't matter to me. We don't have to go in order.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start. Can y'all see my screen? Okay, great. So we did ours on Friedrich Froebel. A little bit of history about him. He was a son of 5. His dad remarried when he was around 4 years old, and he did not feel loved as a child growing up with his stepmom and his stepdad. He experienced a profoundly unhappy childhood. He then decided to move in with his uncle. And I'm thinking that because of what he dealt with as a child, not feeling loved, is what he became later on in his life. So here's a picture of him to start off, and a little bit about his life and his career. So Friedrich Froebel was a German educator, and he is best known to be the founder of the first kindergarten, and he is one of the most influential educational reformers of the 19th century. During his career, he taught in private duty. He served as an educator for children of noble families and who didn't have a lot of money. and he just worked at different schools throughout Germany. His influential views. So Froebel, I spelled it wrong the second time, sorry. Froebel believed that it was important for practitioners to understand the principles of observation in young children, including professional practices, the multiple lenses throughout which they see children, and that children see their worlds, as well as offering children freedom with guidance and considering the children's environments.
Okay. He believed that the purpose of education was mainly important through play. He passionately believed that students learn more through play, as play with themselves, like play on their own or playing with others in the classroom. And he wrote a book in 1826 called On the Education of Man. Can you go up a little bit, please? And the book is basically all of his philosophy over play, on how he thinks it's important in the classroom. And that's what he used in his schools and how he taught. He all of his philosophy he wrote in his book. And I put a quote in from his book, and it said, "The purpose of education is to encourage and guide man as a conscious, thinking, and perceiving being in such a way that he becomes a pure and perfect representation of that divine inner law through his own personal choice. Education must show him the ways and meanings of attaining that goal." And that's a picture of his book.
Okay, I'm gonna do this part because our other partner can't really speak. So, and I'm gonna have to read it because she did her part and we all just did our own parts. So one of the key concepts that the teacher wanted us to talk about was kindergarten 1837 and the nursery school movement. So it was told that in 1837, Froebel founded his own school and called it kindergarten, or the children's garden. Prior to Froebel's kindergarten, children under the age of 7 did not attend school. It wasn't as like something that they saw a lot during that time. His educational materials. So the materials were called his gifts. There were materials that were one of the first used materials in kindergarten schools worldwide. And it's just a picture of an example of some of the materials that he used for play in his kindergarten classrooms.
He used to be an architect, so he, like a lot of these blocks are the basic building blocks of all structures and buildings and things like that. So that was kind of neat little thing about him as well. Good job. He ended up making, they called them gifts, and he ended up making, I think, 10 different gifts. And some of these theorists, like I think Montessori also made her own set of toys and stuff like that. So some of these theorists did not just make their own curriculum or have their own type of school. They also made toys and things, which is kind of neat. All right, next group. Thank y'all for sharing. Great job. Anybody who wants to go?
We can go.
Okay.
Let me share my screen. Okay, hold on. Okay, so we had Maria. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, we had Maria Montessori. She was an Italian physician and educator. She was born in 1870 and she died in 1952. She was enrolled in an all-boys school because she wanted to be an engineer. And she was actually the first in her gender to become a medical doctor. And we also found out that she was actually a single mom. And her education philosophy is that children can take responsibility for their own learning. And then Carissa is going to do the rest.
Okay, so she actually did created a school, or like did a notion to create the school, the Casa de Bambini. I think that's how you say it. I'm not positive. Which pretty much was so that the children in her class or in her school
were able to like teach themselves and everything. And her reason for going into education is because she wanted to work with like special education students. Because like back in the day they were unteachable, and she didn't agree with that. But she didn't really believe in like imaginary play and pretend play, which is crazy to think about because she was very hands-on in the classroom and everything. Yeah.
Very good.
And then we also just have some quotes down here that are from her. Never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed. The greatest sign of success for a teacher is to be able to say the children are now working as if I did not exist. And one test of the correctness of educational procedure is the happiness of the child. And then we have a picture down here too of the Casa del Bambini.
Awesome. Very good. Okay. Next group, who would like to share next?
Our group can go. Steiner. Am I good to go ahead and share the screen? Okay. I'm gonna make that bigger. Okay. So Steiner, he was born in Croatia in the late 1800s, and he was like super smart. He, all of this stuff listed here, like mathematician, architect, scientist. So, he had a lot of knowledge backing up whatever he ended up doing. And his main thing is opening up schools to educate children. And the first one he ever opened up was to specifically educate children that were factory workers at this one specific factory. And it was really cool that back then his focus was a lot on the arts and on not only doing their like educational needs, but their physical, cognitive, and emotional. I can pass it off to another group member after that, but it's really interesting that how he wanted to teach his schools is kind of how our schools are being formed more like nowadays.
I thought what was interesting is that he currently has over 1,000 schools. So he was very good at what he did. I like that instead of having a head teacher, he had teachers, all teachers had their, responsibilities they could do. They didn't have to follow just one person. If they decided they, wanted to do something, I guess, they basically, they share the responsibilities, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And there was also a quote that I thought was interesting. It said, the need for imagination is a sense of truth and a feeling of responsibilities. These are the three focus which are very nerves of education. And then basically he, let's see. And he had childhood as a phrase of life important into its own self. He had 3 periods. He had the will, the heart, and the head. So I don't know if someone else wants to speak. Or not.
Sorry, I didn't know where to unmute while I was screen sharing. I can finish us off. I was looking around for it. Okay, I can finish us off that. I'm not sure if she mentioned, but I thought it was super interesting that teachers were meant to stay with the same children till the secondary stage. And I think that that's something that his view seemed very interesting, that it causes a really good relationship with the child to the teacher, and it lasts until they get to the secondary stage, which puts a focus on like kids, you don't know what kind of adult figure they have in their life. They're going to have a teacher until the secondary stage. And he made sure to include a lot of music and art and singing into every day with his school. And so, yeah, that's him.
I call the Waldorf schools the hippie schools, because if you've ever seen one, let me screen share real quick. All their materials in their schools are made up of things from nature. And so you'll find like wooden furniture, wooden toys. They'll bring artists in. They might have somebody from like a Buddhist person come in and teach them like yoga or something. Like it's very earthy and stuff like that. So anyway, I just thought that if there was a school like this around here, I would want to go to a Waldorf school or like send my kids to one. I don't know of a good one around here though. Anyway, good job. Thank you for sharing. Who would like to go next?
We can go next.
Okay.
Cassandra, can you share your screen? So we had John Dewey. And he grew up and lived in America, where that's what the book said. There was like extreme racial tension and in certain parts of the country when he was born here. So, and then his influential views. So most of his influential views had to do with like England, or it was just around the time that it was then. So there was a baby farming where if the family couldn't afford like their child, they would send it off to make money, and it was like a serious offense. And then it also had to do with like society classes, and both of these things had a lot to do with how like children were affected, which we'll get more into like why in a minute. And then the purpose of education is he believed that education of children requires like clear structure, like from the teacher, but they also need free will and structure and direction to like get the most out of their education. But he also saw education linked with democracy. And then laboratory schools started from nursery to 12th grade. They were opened in Chicago in 1896. And there were 2 rules that he wanted like influenced throughout the school. So the school would be seen as like a community, like within itself. And like the teachers can't change like what happened to the kids. So that's why we talked about like the influential thing being the baby farming and like the society class, because those things do have an influence on children and nobody can change like what influences them. And then another thing we had to do was experiences. So people learn from like their experiences, and children are a main one that like learn from them. So whatever happens to a child like when they're young will affect their future with learning. And that's all.
Thank you. I think we have one more group.
It's us. Just 1 second, I'll share my screen. Okay, I've never done this before, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I had some technical difficulties to say the least, internet-wise.
Can you see it? I don't know. Okay, just kidding. Do you see it now?
Almost. There it is.
Okay. We had the McMillan sisters. That's Margaret over here on the left-hand side, and then Rachel on the right-hand side. They were sisters who were nursery school pioneers, and they lobbied for the 1906 Provision of School Meals Act, which basically helped kids who needed meals get free meals at school. The 1906 Provision for Meals Act was an act to make provisions for meals for children attending public elementary schools. The act provided free meals to children in need, and it also started out, I think they said, in England, or that's where they were mainly. I don't know if they said it was the school that was the area where they started off, and then I don't know if it went to other schools or how that worked, but that's something else I remember. And then Tyler, if you want to read about the open nursery school.
An interesting fact that I found out besides the open nursery school is that they actually were born in the U.S. and they moved to Scotland when they were 5 because their dad died and their mom wanted them to go back to Europe. So they kind of saw how schools were being ran in Scotland, and then they decided, like, growing up, they're like, okay, I view this differently. So that's when they opened up the open nursery school with the idea. It was either in England or Scotland, one of those Europe countries, and it kind of just expanded.
They were in London, I think.
Where children expanded through firsthand experiences and active learning. Kind of like you do it firsthand, you learn from physically doing something and going through it. You kind of get a life lesson out of it, or just a lesson like this is right, this is wrong, or maybe I should do this differently next time. And Michaela will actually explain. Well, I'll give it to Michaela.
So they had their own schedule. So the school opened around 7:30, and the parents would drop the kids off around 8 to 9, because most of the parents worked at like factories. They'd have breakfast with porridge. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but porridge is basically what I consider like as our oatmeal. It's like crushed grains with milk. They spent their morning doing handwork or playing in the garden. Then they had lunch, and then their activities consisted of free play, music, and games. What they're really known as is like the open nursery school, but also the forest school. Hold on. Well, I thought I had something wrote down. Is it down at the bottom? Yeah. So in the early 90s, some nurses from the Somerset returned from a trip where they had visited outdoors child center played outdoors, and they were impressed. So they started their own forest schools at their college. So I was assuming that like the Macmillan sisters had a lot of stuff to do with the outdoorsy and their hold on. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, my internet's like very lagging.
That's okay.
But they're mostly known for their nursery school movement and the free meal plan.
Cool. Good job. Thank y'all. All right. Any concluding thoughts about that? Anything? Okay. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into chapter 4. Let me screen share with y'all. We may not get through all of chapter 4 today, and that's okay, because at the end of chapter 4, there's a Jeopardy game, and I know we won't have time for that, and I'm going to use the Jeopardy as extra credit for us. So we'll do as much as we can up until about 3:50 for chapter 4. And then next time, we'll just finish up where we leave off, and then we'll play the Jeopardy game, and then we'll move on to chapters 5 and 6. So no rush.
Still do the quizzes tomorrow, correct? Or by tomorrow night, correct?
Yeah, if you feel like it. If you don't feel ready to do it, if you'd rather wait till we go over the rest of the chapter, that's fine. We should get through quite a bit of it, though.
Okay,
but I'll leave it up to you. It's no big. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, so chapter 4 mostly talks about behaviorism and a couple of different behaviorists who had influence on our field. So let me screen share with you. I'm gonna try to sit down again. My stomach started cramping really bad. So I stood up and it feels better, but I'm gonna attempt sitting again. Okay. So anything to do with external reward systems, that is behaviorism. If it's not intrinsic, if it comes from the outside, that's behaviorism. So what are the pros and cons of external reward systems? What do you think the pros of that are?
Positive actions or behaviors by the children, like desired behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, you might get the behavior that you want. It might be motivating for some kids to get a reward. You could think of like sticker charts, anything like that. So what are some of the negative things about that?
That they may just
Oh, okay.
well, the kids might expect it from you, like every time they do a certain thing. So like maybe like every time they put something away, they'll expect a sticker. And it's just at that point you just want the sticker and it's not really helping you. Like you're not doing it because like it's not the same reasoning type of thing and the kid doing it.
Yeah, so maybe whatever the behavior is, the good behavior may not transition into, if nobody else was around, would I still do this good thing? Because they're not going to get the reward unless somebody sees them do it or whatever. So it's very like, it kind of makes them reliant on external um input to say like, hey, you're doing the right thing, instead of just knowing that you are and wanting to because it's the right thing to do. But it does work. I mean, how many of you have had some kind of external reward that worked, that helped you achieve some goal? Can you name something?
Yeah, I can. I believe in 8th grade, I wasn't, I don't know what part I had failed. I don't know if it was a benchmark or what exactly I didn't pass. So instead of some electives, I had to see my same teacher after school. And it was me and another girl. And, he told us like, hey, if you guys work hard and you're able to pass the history section. I don't know. I don't remember what kind of test it was, but it was an important test from the state. I will take you guys out for ice cream. And we did. We both passed it. And I was happy because I got free ice cream.
Well, yeah. So sometimes it does work. And then whatever it was you were trying to get that kid to do, sometimes when we do one behavior, something else, because everything is connected, right? So if we do one behavior to get whatever reward, we might, by happen chance, take some of that information with us, or be in a situation where we meet somebody that, helps us along the way for another thing in our path. So whatever it takes to like get the kid to do the behavior you're looking for, it might not be good from the outside looking in. It might not be good to always need that, behavior to be rewarded, but to get them to do the thing, like pass the test or whatever, you never know what other things that might bump up into, like, or bump up next to, that might lead them somewhere else. So I'm not going to say that you shouldn't have a sticker chart in your classroom. Whatever motivates the students in your classroom to do well, you'll notice what those things are, and as you learn your students, and it's totally up to you. A lot of people don't like the behaviorist view because they think it should be intrinsic, but it does work for people. External rewards do work. That's why you get stipends and you have bonuses at work and stuff like that. So it works not only for kids, but also for adults. And like, I give myself stickers for walking or working out, and it might, the fact, like what I was trying to explain earlier, is maybe I'm actually trying to work out so that I can stay healthy. But by happen chance, because I'm getting the stickers and I'm getting reward for working out, I also get the health benefit of just being outside. Or I might run into my neighbor and be able to talk to my neighbor and get to know my neighbors. So anyway, as long as you're seeing it's doing good in your classroom, I say go for it. It's not, bad necessarily, but some people will say that it is. So behaviors have consequences. That's what the whole behaviorist view thing is about. So Locke, as you guys said, believes in tabula rasa, which is that, we're completely shaped by our environmental cues and by who we're around and what we're exposed to. Like, we're a blank slate when we're born, and we are built from the bottom up after that. And it's all external stimuli that we're built from and shaped from. So behavior is a result of a stimulus and response. I'm stimulated to do something, and the response that I get determines whether or not I'll do that thing again or not. That is behaviorism. Your environment plays an important role. A lot of times when you're looking at behaviorist points of view, they can be measured. So like a sticker chart, for example, imagine a sticker chart. You can count the number of stickers that you got for that week or that month. So that's one way of measuring how well you did or how often you performed a certain behavior. So a lot of times behaviorism, it relies on being able to measure a certain behavior. It's testable. Thinking, feelings, and emotions are not really taken into account. It's not some sort of deep philosophical thing like social learning theory, or it's like, why did you want to be just like your father? And it goes into like, well, he yelled at you, but he also worked really hard. It's like getting into like your subconscious and stuff about why you are the way you are and your morals and all. That's what social learning theory is. Behaviorism is simply like, I did it because my dad told me to do it, or I did it because my teacher told me to do it, and I would get in trouble if I didn't. Like, it's very face value. And they did a lot of experiments on animals because they thought that we learned in the same way that animals learn. So, speaking of experiments on animals, we have Pavlov's dog. I told you guys a little bit about Pavlov's dog the other day, but basically, Pavlov did an experiment on an animal to see if he could condition him to, or her, it doesn't really say the gender of the animal, doesn't matter, but he did an experiment to see if he could get the dog to perform a certain behavior, and I'm going to show you guys a video of that. Before I show you the video, if you look on page 49 of your book, at the very bottom, there is a chart, or figure 4.1, and it shows a couple of different types of, I guess we call it a couple of different vocabulary words, like unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, stuff like that. We're going to refer back to this chart. Just be aware that it's there for now, and we're going to watch the video, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about that chart. So here is Pavlov's dog. I had everybody in my house get off the internet. I told them that when y'all were in the breakout room. So if my internet is slow, I don't know what else to do.
Pavlov's aim was to discover what caused saliva to flow. He rerouted the salivary ducts to the outside of his dog's cheek so that he could collect and measure the spittle. Perhaps he thought the production of saliva might be the result of a fixed nervous reflex, like a knee jerk.
5 минут 42 секунды.
After taking many measurements of spittle, he confirmed that the dogs drooled automatically when their tongues touched food. He called the response the salivation reflex.
4,5. Хорошая собачка. Я предлагаю поменять собачку.
But his work started to run into trouble. As his dogs became familiar with the experimental routine, they started to fill their cheek tubes before Pavlov had a chance to stimulate their tongues. The dogs were learning to anticipate food. Pavlov tried a new technique. He erected screens so that the dogs couldn't see what was going on. Before passing meat through the hatch, he introduced a stimulus that was totally unrelated to feeding. A ticking metronome. First, the dog dripped saliva into its cheek tube only when the food appeared. But after a number of trials, the dog began to connect the ticking with the arrival of meat. Soon the sound alone made the dog drool. Eventually, the dog salivated as much to the ticking itself as it did originally to the presentation of food.
Homer, идите сюда. Что я говорил?
He called this new response the conditioned reflex.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right there. So let's say that let's look back at this. Hold on real quick. Alrighty. So we've got these acronyms here. Oh man. We got UCS, which is unconditioned stimulus, UCR, unconditioned response, CS, conditioned stimulus, CR, conditioned response, and a couple of other things: generalization, extinction, latent, spontaneous recovery. Okay, so I'm going to ask you. So a dog is given food and it starts to salivate or drool. Would this be an unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, or conditioned response?
Response.
Unconditioned response, right. So a bell is presented and they start to ring the bell before the food arrives. And initially the dog is not drooling, but they're still ringing the bell when the food is arriving, or they're putting the food in front of the dog's face. What is that one? Unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, or conditioned response?
Conditioned
Response.
stimulus.
It's a stimulus. Yeah, because it's not, the response would be coming from the dog. So it's a stimulus. So I'm going to ring this bell when you're presented food. So I'm conditioning you with this stimulus of ringing this bell. Okay. So after a number of pairings of the bell and the food, the dog will start to salivate even if food is not present. Is that an unconditioned response or a conditioned response?
Conditioned response.
Yeah, it's because I used that bell. So now you're salivating when there's not even food present. Okay, so let's say that instead of using the bell, I used the metronome and I started feeding you with the metronome playing. Or it could really be anything. It could be a whistle. It could be anything. What would you call that? Generalization, extinction, latent, or spontaneous recovery?
Spontaneous recovery.
What do you guys think? It's not spontaneous recovery. Pick from one of the other ones: generalization, extinction, or latent.
Generalization.
Yeah, because the dog is generalizing a different conditioned stimulus with the food, with receiving food. So I could use music, I could use a whistle, a bell, a metronome, anything else. And as long as I, condition the dog like, hey, you get food when you hear this thing, that is generalizing that I get food whenever I'm hearing a certain sound or seeing a certain thing.
Basically, any sound.
Do what?
Basically, any sound would be a generalization.
Yeah, and it really doesn't even have to be a sound. Like you could probably hold something up or do some kind of a hand gesture for the dog to see. It's just some sort of a paired stimulus. It doesn't necessarily have to be sound. But you can pair any stimulus with the food and it becomes a generalization. Like, for example, whenever I'm crinkling any kind of paper, it doesn't even matter what it is, my dog thinks that it's food. It could be a maxi pad. It could be anything. It doesn't matter. If they hear the crinkling of the paper, they think it's food. So anyway, that's a generalization. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a noise though. All right. So let's say that you stopped giving the dog food whenever the bell is rung or whatever. What would you call that? Eventually the dog would stop expecting it, stop salivating. What would you call that?
Extinction.
Yeah, because you're like, here's the bell. And at first they're like, oh, that's when I get food. That's when I get food. But then you stop giving them the reward. You stop giving them the food. So the behavior gets extinct because they're like, I'm not getting the food anymore. I'm just hearing the sound. And then spontaneous recovery is, it can come back. You can recondition them to do it. So associations are difficult to erase. So this research has actually been used to theorize about alcoholism and phobias and all kinds of things, because we're so conditioned to believe certain things or have certain feelings toward things or want to do certain things. Like when I'm at a crawfish boil, I want beer. Like, and I'm usually cooking the crawfish. That's just, and I'm not an alcoholic, but I'm just saying, like, they go together. Do y'all have anything that you feel like is paired in your head? And it's like, man, if I do this, I have to do this.
I would say the same thing with me with food as well. Like if I eat tacos, Mexican tacos from a taco truck, I have to have a Coke with it. If not, if I drink water, it does not taste the same.
Not the same.
It's not as satisfying.
So we have all kinds of things that we're conditioned, like conditioned stimuli that we don't even probably realize. So that's why this research has been used to study addictions and eating habits and phobias and all kinds of things. Does anybody else have anything you want to share? Maybe a phobia that you have, anything like that you have a stimulus and then the phobia kicks in and it's not even. My friend Misty, when we're out, Like if we're at the bar or we're out at a restaurant or whatever, she will not get up and go to the bathroom because she feels like everybody's going to look at her. Like nobody cares. Nobody's looking at you, but like she won't go because she has that phobia. And I guess somewhere, sometime, people looked at her when she walked through somewhere and it made her not ever want to do it again. So that's kind of weird, but that's what phobias are, kind of weird, you know? Anybody have any other examples? Okay, so
I'm sorry, I was too late to press it. I just finished student teaching I just finished my field 3 this past semester where we actually got the student teach in the classroom. And I would say one thing that I didn't, my mentor, she might have, but I didn't yell at the kids because I know as a kid, when I was in the classroom and the teacher yelled at me or my parents yelled at me, like it affected me. So when me in the classroom, I choose not to yell or raise my voice to the kids just because how I was in the classroom. And I know that I didn't like it. So I know some kids may not like that, like being yelled at, because you don't know how they will react to that.
Yes, that is true. Good point, and that's a good connection that you made there. I'm going to just really quickly. So we looked at Pavlov's dog. We looked at classical conditioning. That's what that's called, is classical conditioning. Let me ask you a question because I'm about to tell you something important. Classical conditioning. Did the dog have a choice to salivate or to not salivate?
Yes.
No.
No.
It's a subconscious response.
I don't think so.
No choice, right?
No.
Kind of like a reflex, okay?
Yeah.
So that is the difference between classical conditioning and operant conditioning, which we're going to look at Skinner and operant conditioning next time we meet. But you have classical and operant, and the biggest difference, maybe one of the only differences, is that in classical conditioning, you're studying a creature that doesn't have, like you're studying a behavior, a conditioned behavior that animal or person does not really have control over. It's a reflex. They do it naturally. But with operant conditioning, there is a sense of choice. So classical conditioning, there's no element of choice. So your unconditioned stimulus would be, one more time, just to go over it again, unconditioned stimulus would be what? In the Pavlov's dog video.
Dog drooling.
And then unconditioned response. Okay, so the whole behavior is the dog is drooling, right? So that you give the dog food and the dog is eating the food and the stuff's going into the little tube, the test tube on the side of the dog's mouth. So you've got the food, the drooling, the bell, and then the drooling. Those are like your 4 things, okay? So the food, the original presentation of food to that dog, is that an unconditioned stimulus, an unconditioned response, a conditioned stimulus, or a conditioned response? Did we do anything to make the dog?
Stimulus.
Yes, it's an unconditioned stimulus because we naturally drool whenever presented with food.
I'm thinking about food.
And then the unconditioned response is the what? So I present you with food and the unconditioned response is what?
Drooling, salivating.
Drooling or salivating. Now I start to ring a bell when I present you with food. What is that? What is the bell?
Conditioned stimulus.
Yeah.
Stimulant.
Yep, that's a stimulant, the conditioned stimulus. Because normally the dog would not salivate just from me ringing a bell. I had to condition that. And then the conditioned response is, I now salivate even without the presence of food. All you have to do is ring that bell. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions about these?
I have a quick comment, and I ran to the bathroom, so I hope nobody, or I don't know if anybody already said this, but a funny video that I paired with this, because I learned this in a previous class, was in The Office,
Jim did it as a prank to Dwight, like to make a chiming noise and then offer him candy. And then eventually he would do the chiming noise, and then Dwight would like stick out his hand for the candy and kind of look up like, why did I just do that? And he didn't even realize that he had just been through this
We
whole
should
thing.
look it up. Got it.
Yeah, I thought that was funny little nod to that.
Great example. And a lot of people watch The Office. I don't, so otherwise I probably would have thrown that in this PowerPoint. But thank you for sharing that. So, I mean, when we talk about conditioning in Skinner's work with operant conditioning, where there's a little bit more element of choice, we'll talk about how that relates to the classroom. With classical conditioning, it was kind of just a starting point. You don't really have, you as a teacher aren't going to really be classically conditioning your students per se, but operant conditioning applies more to the classroom, which we'll go over next time. So chapter 4 is not very much longer. It's just a couple of slides. We'll look at Watson and Thorndike and Skinner next time, and then we'll do the extra credit Jeopardy. So we will start off there. And if y'all have any questions, I'll stay on. And if not, I'll see y'all next time. If you don't want to take the quiz yet, don't worry about it. No rush. You can take the chapter 3 and 4 quiz or whatever. Just do what you want to do. It's up to you.
Professor, are we?
Guideline. Yes.
So for our group, is Katie Ellis still in this class?
I'm going to email her right now. And if she does not respond to me today, I am going to assume that she's probably not in this class, and y'all can go ahead and get started without her. Do y'all, how many people do you have in your group?
We have 3 without her.
Okay, that'll be fine. I wouldn't even try to include her at this point because she hasn't logged on in a couple of days, and she also hasn't attended any of the classes.
I hope she's okay.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find
I
out.
know her, I think. She's from a town right beside us. If I'm thinking of the same person. But I thought she graduated. Would she still be in this class?
No, I don't think so. So I'll try to get to the bottom of it and just see.
Will you send us an email from like to our group members, like updating us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, you too. And if y'all want to wait for the chapter 4 quiz, that's fine. If you want to wait on chapter 3 as well, that's also fine. Doesn't matter to me.
Yes, ma'am.
See you guys later.
I have a question before I go.
Okay. Let's stop.
I'll go next.
Well, you can ask your question first because it's
No, mine's going to take longer.
Okay, my question is, so I know we have our groups and like our presentations and everything. I am in 4+1, and the days that we are like, that you have the scheduled group presentations, they have us set to be like at meetings and stuff during those days. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it in person class. Like I will, but I don't know. I wanted to talk to you first before, because I was gonna ask them, because this is also my class. They understand that a lot of us are taking our last few undergrad classes right now. But during those days that you have set for us to do the in-person class, I think I'm gonna be in the Woodlands doing some meetings over for our 4+1 program. I think they told us it's probably gonna be like during our class. Like that's why. So I don't know. I didn't know if I can like present before. I know I can do like a presentation on my own.
You could do a couple things. You could record on a Zoom and send us the Zoom link to you recording, like maybe the intro part, and you just do the intro to y'all stuff.
After talking about it with my group and just record it, send it to you so I can be like, I'm presenting, but I can't be there.
Yeah, you could record yourself on a Zoom and then just send it. Don't send it to me. Send it to your group, and they can be like, blah blah. We're blah blah group. So and so is not here, so she's gonna start us out, and here, and they could play your recording of you, clicking through this PowerPoints and everything, and like clicking through the slides and you.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure because it's like something I can't get out of. It's like required for us to be there.
Okay. No, don't stress about that. That's fine. I think the recording is great because, like, I could say you could zoom in during your presentation, but you don't want to miss whatever's going on in that meeting. So just do a little Zoom, record yourself, send it to your group for whatever part you're presenting, and they can just slip that in there and show us the recording of you presenting that portion.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for talking to me about it.
Of course. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
You too.
All right, Professor. Sorry. I just we're gonna meet up soon to work on ours. And I just wanted to ask you, so I know we have to create 2 games based on the theorists that we decide or we chose. But my question was, do the 2 games have to be attached to one teaks or can it be 2 teaks?
It can be different ones.
So as long as it's the same grade level, or it has to be 2 different, oh, it can be 2 different grade levels.
I think that mostly in the past, people have chosen one grade level.
Okay.
But as long as you're dealing with one theorist, the biggest connection that I want y'all to get from this is that this game is supported by this part of this person's theory. That's the biggest connection, how it connects to that theorist.
Okay, so for example, like if I'm just making this up, this has nothing, I don't even think this has nothing to do with our theorists, but if it had to be a sensory game, I don't know about how you put puzzle pieces together of numbers. You can say, oh, well, in the theeks, it say that students have to be able to match numbers, I don't know, or something like that together, yada, 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 and you would just explain that. This is just made up.
Yeah. So if that, let's say it was for kindergarten, so that could be one game deals with number matching for kindergarten, and then another game deals with seriation or something else or science something, I don't know, anything.
Okay.
Community building, role playing, I don't care, anything.
Yes,
as long as it's the same grade level and it somehow relates to your theorist.
Okay, and then it does say that we have to bring one of the games to the classroom to present on that day, right?
So you're gonna bring the 2 games that you make.
Now we make?
Yes.
So like what, one of ours, we were deciding to do Monopoly.
So you're doing 4 games total. You have 2 games that already exist, and then you're choosing those 2 games and like how they relate to your theorist, and then you have 2 games that you're creating.
So it has to be a total of 4 games?
Yes, and you're bringing the 2 that you create to class. The 2 that already exist, like Monopoly or whatever, you do not have to bring that. You're going to bring the 2 games that you're creating.
So like that we made with our hands?
Yes, and we play them.
So we can, well, for that, like we would have to like use that construction paper and stuff like that to make it, or like or do you suggest like that we go buy stuff?
I have had people do a murder mystery, not murder mystery, but that type of murder mystery, like escape the room type stuff. I've had people print stuff like that off the internet and do games like that. I have had people do role playing type games where they're just moving chairs around or something, so they didn't even really have to. They created like little cards to hold, but it wasn't like a whole elaborate bunch of game pieces with the game board and all that. But I've had people do that too. I have had people make game boards and stuff. So it's really up to you. You know, you don't have to spend a lot of money.
Okay, perfect. And okay, so in the PowerPoint, we need to include all those 4, right?
Yes.
Pictures of them and a description and instructions on how to play them.
Yeah.
Okay.
How they align with your theorist, like why you include those. So if somebody were to walk in your classroom, you could be like, actually, this is backed by theory. We're not just playing games for fun. Like this is theoretically based.
Perfect. I got it now. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, bye.